Get a bit closer and you can smell that.
That is fine-looking coffee.
I need to put some water in, don't I?
Yeah, is there enough coffee in that?
Yeah. Well, it should be 3, unless it's moved in the car.
I'm sure there should be more. I mean, that's
fine.
That's the largest stovetop espresso maker I've ever seen.
Trust me, it's fine. We're not making espressos, it's fine. Don't worry, it'll be good. Trust me.
Okay.
I've worked it out. Is this cold, Dave?
Yeah. It's cold.
I have it set on the 3 dial for 3 people because when I had it set on the 2, it was too weak. This is just perfect. Trust me.
Well, I guess that depends on what you call perfect coffee.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And the strength.
Oh, right. But if you don't like it, it's tough.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, we can set the dial up for your next one and have your eyes popping out of your head.
Yeah. Well, this will be my second cup of coffee of the day, which is not normal for me because I have one decent cup of coffee in the morning and then that's it. But I did have an early cup of coffee this morning, and it's now 9:30, and we're at Dave Shrimpton's house.
We are.
Hello, Dave.
Good morning, gentlemen. It's nice to have you here at long last.
It says it's 18 months since we planned to actually have this event.
And here we are in sunny Hertfordshire.
Yeah.
You could have picked a better day, though, couldn't you?
Yeah, but I wanted you to experience the lane at its finest. So
no, it's definitely got worse since I last came. I bought Julie's car, so I think I'm not getting mine damaged and dirty.
A wise decision. A wise decision.
And that coffee that you heard grinding earlier, that's pretty special coffee, isn't it?
It is. It comes all the way from Nicaragua.
It does. It does. And that's via a roaster in Cambridgeshire somewhere. And actually, I've just got a little bit confused because you just said we're in Hertfordshire, because I thought we were in Cambridgeshire. So we're just right on the border, are we?
We're on the very border. Actually, the end of my lane is the beginning of the Fens. So there you are.
It's not the proper Fens. Don't listen to him.
I was going to say...
It's called Fen Road.
I know, but, you know, I could live in Mallorca Avenue, but it doesn't mean I live in Mallorca.
It can be whatever we want it to be. This week it's Hertfordshire.
Yeah.
Well, Dave is, of course, the master of illusion when it comes to all things photographic, so if we want to pretend we're in the Fens, we can do.
We can pretend that, indeed. We can pretend that. Yeah.
Well, one thing we're not going to pretend about is the quality of this coffee, which is from Stephen Franks of Cocoa Bolo Coffee, which is cocobolo.coffee. That's how you actually get onto his website.
It's a coffee roaster, isn't it?
It is. He is a coffee roaster. And instead of making a coffee donation, that's KO-FI to the podcast, he sent us coffee, real coffee, and it's beautiful. So thank you very, very much, Stephen.
I don't think Erik got any though, did he? Because I think postage to America might have crippled business.
I mean, Erik did send a message saying, "Don't worry, you don't have to send one over to the States." And actually, that's one thing. Erik is not with us at the moment. We did actually fly him over with coffee donations, and he stayed at the Dorchester Hotel last night. But he only. This could be him now, but unfortunately he only got so far, and he's around about 3 miles down the road, and we can't really pick him up because we're too tight on time. So that's a real shame. So it's just going to be Andrew, I, and Dave Shrimpson today.
You won't get 3 mugfuls that size out of my thing, I tell you. You want three smaller ones.
Yeah, we're definitely doubting Andrew's coffee making abilities at the moment. That's going to be a very small cup of coffee.
Yeah, well,
is that the size we're talking about?
That'll do to start with, yeah.
See, you've validated my opinion about not enough coffee going into that machine.
No, well, it gets 2 decent mugs. I haven't calibrated it for 3 decent mugs.
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough water in there for 3 decent mugs. That's the limiting factor. There's water in there. You can get 12 espressos.
Yeah, Andrew was very careful about how he said that word then, because earlier on he was saying espresso.
Yeah, well, I still think it's espresso.
And it has never been, unless you're a Cliff Richard fan. Only people of a certain age will understand that. What has been interesting about this coffee is the first time I tried it was at a friend's house because my coffee grinder does not work. So I went over to his, and Stephen had sent over some beans. So I went over to my friend's house and he ground them and put them on his stovetop espresso maker. And the flavour was beautiful. The smell was gorgeous. The flavour was beautiful, and it's absolutely really, really nice beans. And then I took them home, and I could not make the coffee anywhere near as good as my friend did, using the same process, using my stovetop espresso maker. So I decided to actually go back to my friend and borrow his stovetop espresso maker and repeat the process at my house. And I still couldn't make the coffee taste as good.
When someone else makes a Sunday roast, it's always better. Someone else's chips are always better. And so clearly someone else's coffee. Isn't that true, isn't it, though?
Sure it is. And maybe it's the water as well.
Well, that's what we're coming down to.
Your water would be recycled quite about a dozen times.
Well,
all that Stokey wheat.
Yeah, well, my water is from the city of Stoke-on-Trent, and whereas my friend's water is from Cheshire.
Oh, well, that's it.
Yes.
It's a better quality.
Come on.
It's a Liberal Democrat.
Cheshire water, we all know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this means that this has to be good coffee that you're making, despite the small portion.
Better be.
I think you need to put it on the bigger stove to give it a bit more oomph.
I can do that.
I'm a bit worried now because I'm now doubting
Your own coffee making.
My own coffee making.
If I pick this up, is the bottom going to fall off?
Well, you don't need to touch the spout.
Okay.
You've already broken Simon's leg.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's not start the podcast with that.
Don't break the coffee maker.
Yeah. So that's a good point, because I've got a lens in front of me here, which I've brought with me today,
A lens board.
and it's actually the first large format lens I ever owned.
So a great sentimental value.
It has huge sentimental value, and it's a Kodak Ektar 152mm f4.5, and it is absolutely gorgeous. And it comes on a Kodak Supermatic.
And you couldn't put a price on it if you had to sell
You
it.
couldn't put a price on it, and
all that emotional attachment involved into it.
that's right.
Irreplaceable.
Imagine if someone dropped it.
Imagine.
Yeah. So Dave picked up my camera, which is a Chroma Carbon Adventurer, and I've got it in front of me, and I mounted it on a lens board I made hurriedly last night, and it doesn't quite fit, and it just needs a little bit of fettling. But they just picked it up anyway and just dropped the thing straight off the front onto the floor. And
it's working. It is working. Is it working?
Well, it's making a weird noise.
Yeah.
Shut up.
After 5 minutes of hitting it and prodding it, Dave's actually got it working again. So, but this was repaired very recently by Bill Orford, who did a superb job on it. And how superb that job still is, we're not entirely sure, but it's making clicking noises, and there is a reasonable chance it might still work. So, oh wow,
Thank you. Everybody, just listen. I'll take no responsibility after this. It's working at this moment.
On that one speed.
Shut up. Yeah. Anyway.
Self-timer work.
No, don't.
touch it.
Yeah, Bill said, do not play with the self-timer. Leave that well alone. And I think the slow speeds are a little bit off, but
always.
Exactly. So we're not going to worry too much about that.
Aren't they always? Yeah. Nice lens.
So here we are in Dave Shrimpson's kitchen, and what a really, really nice place it is. If anybody's been on any of the large format virtual gatherings, you would actually have seen some of Dave's house, in particular a mirror with Gothic carved wood not really arches, are they? But
it's a choir front, believe it or not. It's a medieval choir front or something. So there you go. But it makes a nice mirror as well. So
it does, and it's completely in keeping with Dave's house as well, which is it's in a beautiful part of the world, and it's an absolutely gorgeous house.
But not the fence.
But not the fens. It's the edge of the fens. We don't get.
Not the edge of the fens.
Yeah.
Just because it's called Fen Road or Fen Lane doesn't make it the fens.
Yeah. It's all about scale, though, isn't it? It's about how far away you are, and if you go from space, it's actually next to the fens. So,
this is true. This is true. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's not a reed in sight, I tell you.
And we're making coffee.
We are.
To start the day.
That's it. So today's podcast, which, who knows, it may turn into 2 podcasts, or 3, or 4. We're not entirely sure. But we're going to have a chat with Dave about the things that he does. We're going to talk cameras. We're going to talk his studio. And and we're going to talk a bit about processing and such things. And at some point later on in the day, we're going to do some wet plate as well, which is... have you done wet plate before, Andrew?
No.
Yeah, so it's the first for both of us. So that's going to be pretty damn exciting.
It's a rabbit hole I've been avoiding jumping down.
I should forgot to remind you to wear old clothes, gentlemen. There you go, just in case you get covered in silver nitrate, which you won't.
So,
It'll make a slight
That's good.
So as we're in Dave's dining room at the moment, kitchen diner, and there are 5 cameras that belong to Dave in front of me, all of which look absolutely fantastic. But there's 4 of them on this table, which are, I think, 3 speed graphics, and then is that a Micropress?
Yeah, so basically, I was going to do is start the day off when I do it the way I do it with a workshop. So my cameras, my progression through my cameras, how I started, where I've ended up, and then some of the images that I've taken with the cameras, and then we can, obviously you guys understand them anyway, but the difference between spring backs and graph lock backs and the benefits it gives you. Yep, we've got the crown graphic, we've got a speed graphic. There's my crown, which is my workhorse, which is stripped bare of everything. I've taken everything off of it because I don't want it on there, just because it's light for travelling. That does the majority of my shots, apart from my speed. My speeds, yeah, and that's the beautiful brick, whatever house, Jesus, Micropress, which is a beautiful camera. If you've got a 5.4 camera, that is an absolute belter, and it's rock solid. But of course, it's got a graph lock mechanism inside it as well. Graphics mechanism inside it anyway.
Yeah.
So beautiful camera. So yeah, so I thought that would start the day before we head on to single lens reflex large format.
Yeah.
So are you white or black coffee man?
White if you've done it. I can heat.
I haven't done anything.
Okay. I can heat the milk up if you want.
Well, I'm not that sophisticated. I've heated milk.
Oh,
well, I'm going to have hot milk as well.
your coffee making abilities are declining quite rapidly here. Yeah. You've got you have to have warm milk.
Well, I can't be bothered with that. You don't have to have warm milk. It's fine.
I thought it was like the law.
It's not.
The law, yeah, it's in Nicaragua, isn't it, or whatever. When you're making coffee, right, let's turn that thing
There's a
on.
bit more left in there.
Is there?
There wouldn't have been enough for 3 huge mugs.
Da-da-da-da-da-da. My coffee grinding on. Come on, what's that over here?
What are you doing over there?
I'm supposed to be heating the milk up.
Well, don't you do it in a saucepan on the stove?
No, I do it in my coffee heating up machine, but it's not working.
You haven't dropped it.
I just, yeah. Girl, you're never going to let me forget that. Oh, there we go. Off it goes. There you go. It's got sound effects as well. High-end mechanical processors. So we've got lots of cameras to go through today, haven't we? But I think the discussion we were having earlier is that you can have too many cameras.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
guilty of that. But how you eventually you refine it down to maybe 2, and that's your lot there.
You've got a bit of a way to go then, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I might have.
We could help you with that.
Well, that's the other thing. It's like they're not making any more, are they? And since I don't know why, but everything seems to be going up in price ridiculously at the moment. I think that so many people are coming back to analog. I mean, the amount of people have contacted me.
It's just analog. Full stop has an attraction for youngsters.
Yeah.
Something away from the digital screen.
Anything away from digital.
I saw on YouTube the other day some young guy had almost done a thesis on analog. I think it was a thesis or a...
Yes, please.
And it was exploring all sorts of psychological reasons why analog, which I didn't fully understand.
Yeah. But I think we've all gone through it ourselves, haven't we? It's a bit like when I do my talks about how I used to run a big design studio and we had big digital Hasselblads and we were massive pictures, and I ended up most of my life in Photoshop, not actually doing the photography side of it, and I completely fell out of love with photography. And it's only when I found mechanical cameras again that I fell back in love with, because it's down to me to take the picture, not the camera. I mean, to be honest, I find digital. I mean, I did a shoot the other day, and I did shoot digital, and I ended up with like 500 shots, and I can't be bothered to go through them. I just can't be, and they're all going to be perfect, because the camera's done it.
Yeah,
it's nothing to do with me. It's like, so I love the fact that it's those six or however many you pull out of that drum. You know, you've either nailed it or you haven't. You know, it's that magic moment, isn't it? So, anyway, let's try this coffee.
Yeah, talking about magic moments, here's the moment of truth now.
Oh, yeah.
Is that strong enough for you? Too strong?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
That is very good.
It's better than I can make it in Stoke anyway.
Well, it's the water, isn't it? Barbecue water. It's this fen water we've got here.
It has to be that.
So, here we go. Coffee, Kit Kats. Well, we haven't started on the Kit Kats yet.
Right, well, you might not realise it, but probably around about half an hour's passed since we've just been chatting. And we just had a bit of a tour around Dave's house, which has been absolutely fascinating. And we've just been playing with stereophonic. No, is it
Stereographic.
Stereographic, yeah. Stereophonics is banned, isn't it? So stereographic photography and where Dave dries his negatives and it's just one of those things where we could have just like carried on recording actually, and to some degree I wish we probably had, but no doubt we'll get back to some of those topics that we've done there. But we've come back to Dave's dining room table, which is full of cameras, and actually those people have been on Facebook and a few moments ago. I've just had a little bit of a tour and a little talk from Dave about some of his cameras and things, but we're going to cover some of those topics again now, especially as we have a look at Dave's table of cameras. So what have you got there then, Dave?
Yeah, so like when I do a workshop, I normally sit down and try and explain what the cameras are, because large format can be quite daunting to a lot of people, but to be honest, I find it the simplest form of photography, to be honest. So I start where I start. I start at the beginning, and I started with a 1942 speed graphic. To be honest, when I bought that, I didn't even know how to put a film back in it. I didn't even know. I was trying to put a half plate mahogany plate holder into it. I mean, that's how little I knew. But little did I know that I'd actually bought one with an absolutely cracking focal plane shutter on the back of it. And that's the first camera large format I ever bought. And so you can't see it here, but you get an idea of what it can take. That's an image I took at the where is that? That's the Natural History Museum in London. That when I took this image of the light and shadow coming through the window, and I developed it up, and that's the beauty. Like, you know, the joy we all get when we open up the development tank and we see the negative for the first time. You even know if you've done it or you've destroyed it or whatever.
I was going to say, because people can't see that, you've just held up how large is that photo?
It's about 1810 or 1816 or 1620, something like that. Yeah,
that's right. And it's an absolutely gorgeous shot that's from a high elevated position, looking down on quite a narrow, long space. And what lens would you have used on that? That
would have been the standard camera lens.
Yeah.
So it would have been whatever's in here now. And I'm terrible at knowing what I've got. You guys know what you've got. I actually don't know most of the time. So I can't see what that is. I haven't got the right glasses on, but that's...
Me neither. It looks like a woolen sack from over here.
So that's my...
Is that not Octar?
4.5 something.
Yeah.
Graflex Octar.
Yeah, they were made by woolen sacks.
6 and 3/4 inches. So it's about 150. It's about a standard lens.
Yeah, standard lens. So that's my first camera, a standard lens.
I like sniffing them.
To be honest, sniffing cameras is part of the joy of large format, I think. That's what I love about old cameras. You don't get that with the new cameras.
Yeah.
The new bomb camera I've got, it's got no... Yeah.
No.
It's a bit like getting...
It's leather and
an old
age
Ford Prefect, isn't it? Or something, you know?
Yeah. Well, I hope Soviet large format cameras smell better than the rest of the range. They do not smell good.
But of course the beauty of this is it's got a... I think when I used that, I didn't have to use the focal plane shutter because I used the standard lens shutter on it. And then I run through my cameras. So we've got the Micropress, which is absolutely a brick watch-it house of a camera, but it uses the same Graflex mechanism on the side. Again, focal plane. And then my Speed, which is where this is the one where I actually put in the Dave Burnett combo. So I put in the Aero Hector, with the prism finder on the back, which is I recently did a shot of a girl. She's actually wearing a yellow, and I need to develop these films up. I did it 5:4. She's wearing a yellow parachute, and she's up a ladder. She's 15 foot tall.
Is that in case she falls off the ladder?
No, I just wanted her to be very tall. So she's got this huge dress coming down, and I used the Aero Ectar, but I was in bright sunlight. But because I used the prism finder on the back, I could see without having to put a dark cloth over my head, which is a great combination. And the fact it was Dave Burnett seeing his 2012 Olympic shots that made me go to large format. And when I saw his shot of Usain Bolt going over the line, it's like, whoa, this is the way to go. And then I ended up buying my Crown Graphic, which has obviously got no focal plane shutter in it, but that's probably done 95% of my shots, and I've stripped everything off, the rangefinders, because I want it small and light.
So for people listening who, when you said obviously hasn't got any focal plane shutter, so just explain what a focal plane shutter is and how it differs from the speed graphic.
Yeah, so with the speed graphic, the reason why we all want a speed graphic, or many people want a speed graphic, is you get a beautiful lens at the front with a proper leaf shutter in the fact that protects shots with, but we're limited with, for instance, a camera like a Crown Graphic because it doesn't have a focal plane shutter. The speed graphic I just mentioned has a focal plane shutter, so it has the shutter built into the lens at the front, but it also has a curtain shutter at the back of the camera in front of the film that travels past the film. So in other words, I can then start to use barrel lenses, which are lenses which have got no shutter in them. In that respect, I can start to use Victorian Petzval lenses. And Petzval lenses were invented because they're fast, and the process was invented by Joseph Petzval. It was a competition to invent a fast lens, and he did it by mathematically putting in a lens space. There's an air space in it which speeds the lens up. And that's how suddenly we can start shooting people rather than landscapes back in the Victorian era.
Is there two bits of glass in the...
There's various bits. I can put a link up for it to show you how it works inside. Normally, but there's basically some spaces between the air gap, and it's sped the lens right up. So that can now go into my 1942 camera, and I can still take a shot because I've got a focal plane shutter between the lens and the film. And as that travels past, there's different size slots. And as the slots get bigger, or as they get smaller, I get my faster shots and my longer exposure. And then on the side of the camera, there's a little scale, and it tells me to dial in 2 calculations on the side of the camera to get the speeds I want for the curtain to go past. Very, very simple. But the big challenge is the curtains have to be in good condition. 9 times out of 10, often they're not. Luckily, the cameras I've got are all in good condition. The only person I know is Graham at the moment in America that's making new curtains for them. So if anyone in the UK can start making curtains you'd make an absolute killing for these.
Which Graham are we talking about in America?
Graham Burnett.
Okay.
Graflex Parts.
Graphics Parts. Graham's absolutely brilliant. He's a genius. In fact, he's helped me when I bought one of my cameras. I'll tell another little tip here, and I can put a link up to it. When you buy a Speed or a Crown a Graflex, when you open it up, as I'm doing here, and you hear it open, click, as the front movement comes out from the camera, it travels along its little rails, which is absolutely fine. The challenge comes is people put them back in, and they don't retract it all the way back into the body. So when they close the camera up, they snap the 2 little rails at the back, and I've got so many cameras where I've seen they're broken on the back there, and they snap them off. So when you're looking at a camera or buying a camera, make sure that those 2 little guardrails at the back are in good order. Otherwise, what will happen is your lens front standard will just start flopping about, which is a pain.
Somebody sent you those little rails recently because you had one you repaired and sold, didn't you?
And I didn't sell it in the end.
Did you?
I didn't sell it because it was such a beautiful camera. I just thought, why am I selling it? I don't need it, but I just thought, why am I selling it? Because it's a beautiful camera. But following our last podcast, we did our picnic in the park one, virtual picnic. I was chatting, one of the guys on there, I can't remember who it was.
Nick Lyle.
Nick Lyle, there you go. Thank you, Nick.
Who sent it, wasn't it?
Nick sent me the actual front rail guides, these here, and I was able to cut them down in the studio, cut them down in the workshop, and they exactly fitted in the back there. I relocated the holes, re-drilled them out, routed them through, And my other camera now is spot on. In fact, it's probably better condition than this one. I fumbled with the lens, took it apart and cleaned it out, and it works on all the exposures now. By no means am I a lens mechanic genius. So there's the difference between going for a focal plane and a normal non-focal plane camera like the Crown Graphic. The Crown Graphic will only take a lens with a shutter in it, a leaf shutter in it, and that's it. So I can't put a barrel lens Betzful in it. But if I buy a Speed Graphic, I can put one of those in it, and then it opens up a whole new adventure in photographic wise.
But a Crown Graphic is still seen by many as well, it wasn't it, a good entry point into 4.5 photography, but I'm not so sure really, because they're getting quite difficult to come by in good condition. So if you're new to this and you buy one of those, you could be disappointed because it might have all sorts of things wrong with it, I guess.
I think the thing is, the thing that will go wrong the most will be the focal plane shutter. If you buy a Speed Graphic, if you buy a Crown Graphic, you've got a lot less to go wrong.
Just probably bellows, isn't it?
It'll probably be bellows. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, these bellows are beautiful. A lot of people lose a lot of sleep over their bellows. I mean, to be honest, I'm quite pragmatic in this. I'll just have a go. Just go around with a piece of black velvet and just drape it over the camera. You know, you don't need to go and... I have replaced my bellows in the past, and the last camera I had to completely disassemble it, everything taken out. So I could have put new bellows in. And there is a place, and you'll know the name of this guy, it's in Birmingham.
Camera bellows people.
Absolute genius. He made a new set of bellows for my DeVere enlarger. Really, really good. Very fast turnaround. So... But yeah, so these are the main cameras I shoot with, and these are what I demonstrate. And then we move on to why I shoot with SLR. And the reason I shoot with SLR is, if you look at a lot of my pictures, you'll see there's some movement on it, or the model's moving, or there's something going on that slows you. Because the challenge comes with when we're shooting with a Crown Graphic or we're shooting with a Speed Graphic, we've obviously got a dark cloth over our head, you know, and we're focusing on the back. And I have shot with models before, and you sort of say, okay, I'm ready now, I'm right, stay where you are, and I open the back up and I put the film in and I pull the dark slide out and I turn around and they've moved. And I was like, what are you doing? She said, I thought we were done. I said, no, I've only just focused. But you'll see there's a shot I did of Camille where she's falling back in the rain. And everyone says, how did you get that? How did you get her falling, you know? And that's because I use an SLR, a single lens reflex, which is why I started moving on to the Graflex Super Ds. So
actually, Dave, while you're just talking about that shot, which we used as the cover for the first time that you came on, and it's an extraordinary shot. And I think we must have asked you the question at the time, but I've forgotten. And a couple of people when I've showed that photograph to people, they've asked me the question is, how did she land? I mean, it looks like she's about to fall on the ground.
No, she's a wonderful model, Camille, and I had this vision in my head, or this image in my head, and we talked about it. And we were in the lane, and I said, how far can you bend backwards? So she started bending backwards, and I said, can you hold that? So she basically bent backwards, held the pose, and then went back up again. Wow. She didn't carry on down. So
I mean, that's extraordinary. I mean, it does not look a naturally held position at all.
No, she was able to arch her back, and then, because I wanted her to be able to arch her back and look back at me, and then go back up. And that, obviously, that had a smoke machine, that had, we had some spotlights, and just as we went to take that shot, it started to rain, and you see there's 4 drops go past the screen. So that whole shoot was only 2 sheets of film. That's all we had. That's all we had to do on it. So that leads me on to why I shoot SLR, and that's the reason, because I'm able to have the dark slide pulled out and the film ready to go. I've worked out my exposure. I've set my dials on the side of the camera, and then the moment I want to take the shot, I push the button and it takes the shot. So in other words, I can track handheld something moving and take the shot, which is why we shoot SLR. So then I shot with a Super D, which has a big turret on the top, and then I discovered Jeff at 20th Century, who makes the mirror viewing hoods, and that was a game changer for me because I'm able to focus accurately. Yeah. And then obviously it opens up everything. Then we know it opens up all these projector lenses suddenly become available to me, which is why I shoot most of my shots on large format. I shot at f2.5. It's like, why do you shoot at 2.5? It's stupid depth of field. Well, it just creates these dramatic images.
Exactly.
The other large camera I shoot with, which is in the studio at the moment, has got front movement on it as well. Jeff built me front movement into it, so I can drop the lens down and just get my weird focus right in where I want it and get it drop away straight away, even on a portrait. But then I can start to put in all these projector lenses, which I suppose leads on to how we work out how fast they are, which is on the wall.
Yeah, because we were doing a bit of a live feed on Facebook earlier. We were just playing with lenses just to see about how much coverage a lens will give, but you went a little bit further than that because you explained to us the way that you actually work out what the focal length of the lens is, and then you can also make a calculation and therefore what the aperture of the lens is, because many of these barrel lenses are unmarked.
Yeah.
So we have no idea what they are unless you do something like that. So perhaps you want to just talk through your process about how you do that.
Yeah. So I've got this really lovely 18th century, whatever, 19th century Petzval lens, brass Petzval lens. I found it in the bottom of a box when I bought a camera once. I cleaned it up, and I know it's Petzval because I took it apart and I could see the air gap, the way the lenses were made inside. But it turns out to be a beautiful, beautiful portrait lens, which obviously I can't use on my Crown Graphic because it hasn't got a focal plane shutter, but I can use it on my Speed. But I didn't know how fast it was, and I didn't know what the focal length was. So the simple calculation is if you just hold it up with a window opposite a plain white wall, and you just move the lens in and out until you end up with infinity focused on the wall. In other words, in this case, it's a series of trees in the distance. At that point, if I measure from the wall to the centre of the lens, where the glass is, that's my focal length.
Yeah, actually, let's just cover that point about where the centre of a lens is, because we're not talking about the whole barrel of the lens. The central lens is actually a specific point that you need to find.
It's not the overall, so don't include the lens hood or how far the lens is. You've got to work out where the glass is. In other words, if it's set 5 million from one end and 20 million from the end, you're measuring the centre of the glass, and that's your focal length.
Yeah.
And then once you've got your focal length, A, you know what camera it will fit into, and B, you then just divide it by the width of the glass at the front, and you can work out your f-stop and how fast it is. So from literally 2 minutes, I know that this lens is f3.5 and it's a 5.5 inch.
And I thought you measured the rear element rather than the front element.
Possibly you do.
Oh right, okay. So
possibly you do.
There's a little bit of doubt between the two of us there. So it may be the front, maybe the back. But if we look it up on Google, one of us will find out.
Yeah,
we'll be there.
Whatever it does, it puts me in the ballpark.
Yes.
The only time I do it is if I'm making a pinhole and I need in a tin and I want just some idea for exposure, and I just use the diameter of the pinhole, so it's 0.3 of a mil or something.
That's exactly what I do with my pinholes.
And then you're in the ballpark for exposure, aren't you? Because once you know that.
And I measure from the front of the pinhole to the film plane, and it gives me my f. You know what I mean? I've got an idea of what.
And if it's a curve, I tend to go to the middle point, really. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, we were talking earlier about
pinhole photography, isn't it?
And that's a whole new large format category, isn't it? I mean, so we were doing with soup tins the other day and getting amazing results at 10.8. So
no, I've had lovely results with coffee cans, as you have.
I would strongly recommend to anyone who's thinking about large format, getting into large format, don't be scared by it, and do go into it with pinhole, because you learn so much with pinhole without spending loads of money. All you got to do is buy a coffee tin, make a hole in it, buy some sheet of film. If you can be bothered to get it from America, buy some X-ray film. That you can then cut down in the dark room.
Or use paper negatives.
I tend to use X-ray because I can cut it in red safe light without chopping my finger off in pitch black, and I can develop by inspection. because I did find a lot when I started with my pinhole photography. You would go through all the process I've developed for 15 minutes, whatever, and come up with a blank sheet of film. Oh, well, I got that wrong, didn't I? Whereas when I'm developing in red safe light, I can keep going, thinking, well, actually, all right, I've underexposed that, but if I develop that for 10 minutes more, suddenly the image comes back, and I can see what I've got.
I don't know about all of the X-ray film, but most of the stuff you can buy is double-sided, and it's what we'd call orthochromatic, isn't it? So it's not sensitive to that red end of the spectrum, so you can use that red safe light.
Yeah.
I think you still need to use a fairly dim one, but I think I have 10 or 15 watts, and I've never had an issue developing for.
No, I haven't had an issue.
5 or 6 minutes or so.
I've used it with my large format camera. I've done some beautiful portraits with it as well, with using my large Packard shutter, and I find it a great way of experimenting and getting an idea of light before I go and put in my proper, Fomapan 200 or whatever I'm going to use, because obviously the X-ray film is cheap as chips. Really, it's very cheap.
Even with if you bring it from America, even with postage and tax on it,
it's still considerably cheaper.
A box of 100 8x10 you could probably still get for 50 or 60 quid.
Yeah, but it will scratch, obviously, unless you use your tip was a good one about the glass inserts in the tray.
Do you wash yours? If you wash it first for a few minutes, James Garin of Reality So Subtle told me this.
Yep.
Then it does tend to make more of an even emulsion. If you don't wash it, you can often get some rather nice swirls and stuff going on.
Yeah, I don't wash any of mine, and to be absolutely honest, the whole thing for me is the swirls.
Yeah.
It's the unpredictability, which led me into wet plate, which we'll go into later. So yeah, I love it when you get weird stuff come up. I do find that a lot of my 5.4 film photography is quite predictable now, in as much as I've learnt my cameras, I've learnt my film, I've learnt my chemicals, and I can be I probably get about a 96% hit rate, that they work, and that's me using an iPhone for metering. But it's just because I've learnt my process, which is completely wrong for loads of people, probably.
But all the wonderful, exciting films out there, you can get bubblegum film and double bubblegum film.
I'm sure you can.
And purple film. Look at the whole world of excitement that you're missing out on. Why don't you use all these exciting films of the month?
Well, the reason probably is if I've got a model here for the day, and we've been working out for 4 weeks what we're going to shoot, and I've got a product range, that I'm going to get her to wear. I don't want to chance it at that point. So yeah, I stick to Fomapan. I do Fomapan 100 and 400, and 80% of my film is 400, and it just works for me. It just works for what I want to shoot. I know where I'm going. So apart from I think I've got which we were leading on to in a while. I think I've started to shoot with the Portra 160 5.4 colour film, which I was really worried about and nervous about, but I've actually realised that developing colour film 5.4 is actually easier than black and white. It's just a doddle. All you got to do is get your temperatures right, and the joy that you get from large format colour photography is fantastic. I'm thinking of actually doing some workshops on that, because I'd love people just to get into it, because the shot I was talking about that I did 2 weeks ago was a lady up, Katerina, up this huge ladder. She's up a 14-foot ladder, and I've got this very large yellow military parachute that she's wearing like a dress, and it's all draped, and it's all very bizarre and surreal and Alice in Wonderland, and I shot it using the speed graphic with the Aero Exile lens in it, and they're great black and white, but she tends to disappear into the trees. Whereas I know the 2 sheets of colour that I took, she's going to leap out because the parachute is bright yellow. So there's a space, although I love black and white, there is a space for colour.
Mind you, if you'd have used because the green, I suppose green is not quite yellow, is it? But it's close in the spectrum. A yellow filter would have made the yellow lighter in tone.
Yes.
It probably not affected the trees too much, but it would have certainly given you a bit of differential, wouldn't it? Yeah,
it would. And as we spoke earlier, I tend to notice a lot of my shots are done in the lane, which is outside my studio, which is a bit wet today for us. But I tend to know the way the light comes through the trees, and that again, it's coming down to knowing your cameras, knowing your film, and
well, that's the joy of. I know we're sitting here with 3 or 4 different cameras, but when when push comes to shove and you're doing a workshop or you're on a shoot with somebody, with a model in particular, you're using a camera that you're familiar with, you're using a lens that you're familiar with, you're using a location that you're familiar with, and you're using a film that you're familiar with. And I'm guessing, I think you use HC110.
Yes.
Do you always stick to the same time, or do you vary if it's a particularly overcut? Where you're often using natural, artificial light, aren't you?
Yeah.
Do you vary development if you've got a really bright day or a really dull day?
I shot the other week. Normally I did a shoot with a man with a 1927 BSA down the lane, and for the first time for a very long time I shot with the Aero Liberator, which is a John Minnick camera with the. And I wasn't quite au fait as to how fast that shutter was, so they were underexposed. So I tend to shoot, is it 1+63, I think, with the HC110.
I've never really used it, but I know there's all sorts of development times which you can play around with to suit different situations.
Well, my good friend Graham, who's the guru of large format, and Still Adams used to use it. So I thought, well, it was good enough for him, good enough for little old Shrimpton. So I do 1:63, and the reason I do that is because I'm just a tight ass. In as much as I want to get as much as I can out of it.
Oh, absolutely.
And you use such a small amount. Because I used to use D76.
It's the same as ID11.
Yeah, so I used to use D76, but when I'm developing 6 sheets of 5.4, it's a litre of chemicals.
It is, if you're in a Patson tank.
And if I was using powders, I'd only get 6 developments, whereas when I'm using a bottle of HC110, it's minimal what you use.
No, I think it's right.
So in other words, yes, I do, and it's a bit like when I'm metering. 9 times out of 10 I meter with my iPhone because I know the way my camera. I know how slow the grease is inside and how slow the shutter is. So if I meter up, say 1/25th, I know that I'll set the camera probably to 80th of a second. And when I develop, it says 14 or 13 minutes, but I always develop for 14 minutes.
But with the iPhone, with those apps, they normally have a fairly small area you can hone in on a mid-tone, can't you?
Yeah, it's like a spot meter.
And when I've used them, they seem pretty accurate,
Yeah, I've got I did have, and I don't know the name of my meter. I had the little standard meter we all have, the Min something or other, and it stopped working. And I thought, oh dear,
Minotaur.
Yeah, Minotaur, yeah.
It's not really, I made that up.
No, it's not. So I then went and bought my Posh because I thought if I'm going on a shoot, they need to be taken seriously. So I've got a £500 light meter,
Yeah.
And I was metering the other day using one of these cameras here, and I was metering, and I was thinking, nah, I know that ain't right. And it's like, and so I went back to my iPhone and I said, yeah, I know that's right. And I did. I trusted the iPhone rather than the light meter. And that's not that the light meter's wrong. It's just, A, maybe it's probably more au fait with digital, and B, I just haven't got it set up properly, really, for what I'm doing. But if you're getting good results, just stick with whatever you use.
Well, I mean, some of the electronic spot meter, I have a Minolta F, I think it is, and it's a good meter, but there's quite a bit of faffing around to get it set up.
Yeah.
I'm quite interested. I've got that. I think you back as well, didn't you, Simon? The Matt Beckberger Reveni Labs. Did you see that?
No.
So this is a Kickstarter which was funded and some
a
couple of months ago, and it's a spot meter which is so big.
Okay.
So big.
Right.
And you hold it up. You have to go and look online, David. It's ingenious, and there's loads of people who reviewed it on YouTube. You hold it up to your eye and you keep this one open.
Oh, right.
And the 2 images overlay because you don't actually, the spot meter, you can't see through it.
Oh, wonderful.
And so it's like pop-up vision in your eyesight.
Oh, my God.
And you look at and you're using it, and it sounds weird, but it works really well apparently.
Wow.
And it's got zone system functions built into it. And all sorts of stuff.
Wow. Well, I have to say, zone systems. I don't go there. I'm not really there. That's not where I am.
Well, you are using it, even if you don't know you are using it.
Subconsciously, I'm using it, but I'm not using it via the chart. And
you're using it. If you're concerned about getting decent shadows, and you understand that relationship between exposure and development, you're using the zone system.
Yeah, exactly. So and I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like
even you, Simon.
Even me. Yeah.
Even me. Yeah. Well, I've sat there with my charts and I've done it, and I suddenly thought. You know what? Sometimes you can spend so long thinking about a photograph and measuring it and looking at your tilt angles and all that. by the time you take it, the picture's dead.
Well,
it's like
but
not alive
also
anymore.
you see, if you're using limited materials,
Yeah.
and you're metering, and you want to just ensure that your blacks have sufficient detail.
Yeah.
In zone system terms, that may be zone 3, so 2 stops below medium. Well, the beauty of sticking with one material is that if you start finding that you haven't got that shadow detail where you thought, well, instead of rating your film at 100, rate it at 50.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there you go.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
So it doesn't mean someone else might be rating it at 100, but that's their gear, that's their system. But because you're only using, if you're chopping and changing all the time, then you really...
Then you're chasing the dragon, aren't you? Really?
Yeah.
Whereas, I don't know, that's a drug term, isn't it?
Chasing your dragon with your Minotaur.
Yeah, that's the
light
one.
meter.
But that's why, if the camera says 1/20 or 25th of a second, it's just a number. It doesn't mean to say that's what it is.
No.
It's just, so in other words, if you religiously take your light meter and get that and then put it into there, the correlation between the two is
Yes, well, light meters, if you get anal about worrying about light meters, they can, from one to another and to a camera, they can easily be a stop difference.
Yeah,
easily.
Exactly.
So you work with what system you have if you use the same light meter or your same iPhone.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
And if you're not getting quite the results you want because your shadows are all blocked up, well, rate the film slower.
Yeah.
If your highlights are blown out, then develop it for less.
Yes, precisely. So going back to the crown graphic, why would I shoot with the crown graphic?
I like that.
The reason I shoot with the crown graphic, so for anyone out there, it's the one without the focal plane shutter in the back. So all I've got is my leaf shutter at the front. It's much lighter, and when I did a shoot up in London with Sadie and my son, I was able to have this in a backpack on a nice tripod. If I want to shoot in a studio and I want absolutely beautiful, crisp images, that's the camera every time. It's just an absolute belter. And that camera there took this shot here, which I always show to people. So this is the can't really see with the light in here, but so this was a shot I took with that camera, and what it is for anyone, it's St Paul's Cathedral. So we'd finished the fashion shoot, and
we did actually talk about this shot on the podcast,
And this is, so I just wanted, that is the camera that basically took that shot. So there's the difference. That's why I use that. So it's just as a good working camera, it's a belter. So yes, so that's the cameras, guys, or in here anyway, in the kitchen. And I guess we should head on down to the studio.
Well, there was one question that Andrew asked when we were doing the thing about working out focal lengths of lenses and things like that. The other part of it was coverage.
Yeah,
and you know, it's clear that if you hold it at the correct distance away at infinity, you can work out your focal length from that, but you can also work out or give an indication of the coverage of the lens.
Yes.
And then
when that's at infinity, though, isn't it?
At infinity, yeah, that's a good point. Because as you focus closer, the image circle effectively gets larger, and therefore it'll cover things. That's why sometimes when you might adapt a lens, and you're taking something close to you, and there's no vignetting, and then you take another shot at infinity, and you've got a hard vignette.
So as you move the bellows, if you're focused at infinity, in order to move closer, you're moving your bellows further away from the film plane.
Yeah.
And if you draw on a piece of paper, you can see that projected circle gets physically bigger. So
a cone of light, isn't it?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, yes. Anyway, it gets bigger.
Yeah. Well, one of the things was, and this is something that's puzzled me, because we're in a room with it's not a particularly large window, projecting against a light coloured wall. And you can see a perfect rendition of the window, but I suppose the question is, and because I've got this problem as well, I've never really worked it out, but is the size of the window that's being projected the total size of the image circle, or is actually the image circle potentially a lot larger than that, depending on?
I think the answer to that is that we're only seeing the window because it's that's illuminated.
Yes.
There's obviously a lot going on outside, but
it's hard to see.
Too dark because unless we put a big spotlight on the wall.
Yes.
But what it does give you is, for instance, if you're at a camera fair or you're in a junk shop and you see a camera or you see a lens in an old magic lantern, if you hold it up against the wall, it gives you a pretty good indication.
If you turn that lovely angle poise lamp and point it at the wall, I wonder if that would just pick up the coverage a bit more.
It won't today because it doesn't work.
Oh. But yeah, you're right, because we've got so much overpowering light coming through the window, you're picking that up.
Yeah.
And you can sense, looking at the image on the wall, you can sense there's something going on at the edge, but it's hard to define. But if you illuminated that side, then maybe that would show enough to give you your coverage.
Yeah, but it does give you,
or
for
in
instance,
a brighter room, I guess, if the room is brighter.
What I've got in my hands right now is the large, big red boule lens. And when I hold it up against the wall, it shows us, we're getting quite a big image there. So we're pretty sure we're out here. Do you know what I mean?
There's something going on there. I
think that's just the shadow coming off the lens on the top here. Okay. But it gives you a ballpark. And when we go to the studio, and we can put some big spotlights on the back wall, then we could do it on a piece of white card, and then you'd see the full coverage that you're going to get.
Yeah.
But it's just when I was shown that for the first time, it was a bit of it's like, oh right, now I get it.
Yeah.
It's like the focal. Oh, right, now I know, because when you're physically moving this lens in and out, oh right, okay, it's a focal length, isn't it? Yeah. And then to be able to work out your speed. That's a bit like when Hilary was here, Hilary Clark, she came with 3 of her father's cameras. We didn't know what any of them were, speed-wise, but we worked them all out. And we worked out the aperture and the speed of all of them, which was great. And we were able to pretty much be straight in with the exposure on them, because we shot on Instax. So it's a nice little tip to have anyway, keep it in your back pocket. So it's a good way of finding out what you've got.
Excellent. Well, not entirely sure exactly what we're going to do next, but I think we've just come to the end of this section, so we'll catch up with you well, actually it'll be instantly, won't it? Right, we've just got to Dave's studio, which is away from his house down an absolutely beautiful country garden. So I'm just going to open the door and come in, and it's quite difficult to describe what you look at when you walk into Dave's studio, because it's, well, gothic as a word, but it's just incredible. It's an Aladdin's cave, as that phrase goes. And I'm looking at hats, flowers, heads of dolls, skulls, feathers.
Pickled monkeys.
No pickled monkeys.
Oh.
Although there is a doll's baby head in a sort of actually it looks a bit like a small version of Hannibal Lecter's cell in Silence of the Lambs, along with lots of medical things, body parts, not actual real body parts, but they're certainly reasonably convincing. But there's also, well, normally you would look at, is that a Super D, that Graflex?
That's a Series D.
Series D.
Yeah.
Now, normally you would think of a Series D camera, which is it's a 5x4 SLR, as being a large camera. But actually, it's just the filling between two enormous pieces of bread, because there are two huge cameras. Are these process cameras?
I think this is a process camera. That's the Mahogany Beast is a large process camera, I think. The only thing missing on this camera is the badge on the front, so I can't track its history.
What size ground glass and...
I've got a 17-inch square back I can cover on that.
Right.
And then when I bought the camera, this was my greatest purchase probably. I bought it. I was sat in an Asda car park bidding online when this came up. Unfortunately, it was a stately home sale. I think I've mentioned this in the last podcast, and they were selling lots of marble statues, and I don't think anyone was interested in this camera in the corner of the room. And when I went to pick it up, of course, the big thing about buying a big camera is, have you got the backs for it? Because without the backs, you're a bit stuck. But fortunately, it came with all the original backs. So I had all the reducing backs, and then the full 17-inch square back as well for it. Which is quite phenomenal. This is a beautiful camera. I didn't have a lens and I didn't have a ground glass screen, so I made the ground glass screen. It took me 3 hours to grind that down.
Yeah.
But a good friend of mine, Graham, when he comes and looks through it, it's just like watching high definition television. It's just the moment I put that lens on for the first time and looked through the back, it was like, oh yeah, it works.
I was going to say, because the other thing that struck me when I walked in here is there's a torso of a mannequin of some description. There's probably a proper name for what I'm looking at.
It's a wasp waist dressmaker's Victorian, body part really.
Yeah.
And mannequin.
When women had really tight waists, but they didn't really, did they?
And a really tight corset. That looks painful. I've got to say. And this thing is it's in pretty poor condition, but it looks great at the same time. And there's a piece on the top of it. What even do we call that?
They're called chest pieces. They're designed by a good friend of mine, a designer, Dolly's Follies. She makes beautiful fascinators for headpieces, and she makes these chest pieces. And the combination of her work and my photography just works really well together. So the feather piece as well. There was a series on television called Taboo with Tom Hardy. I don't know if anyone saw it. And I was always fascinated by his sister in it. She's just this wonderful woman in it. Well, I managed to track down the BBC designer who designed her costumes. And I found her on Instagram and I wrote to her, and she was absolutely wonderful. And she came straight back to me. She told me all the feathers I needed to make the outfit. And we follow each other on Instagram. And that's the beauty of social media. So she was helping me to build this. Basically, the shoot I was doing was like sort of a Parisian brothel sort of shoot, really.
As you do.
As I do.
Yeah.
So I shot that with Sadie down the lane with black outfit with all these feathers and canes and top hats and a mourning veil that would hang down, a Victorian mourning veil over the front. And we shot that with the Series D. So I bought this lovely mannequin piece because of the reason. It's the state it's in, because it's what I want. And when people walk into the studio, it's just a lovely centerpiece for a workshop to focus on. Just
to finish off the description of this chest piece, it's largely made of feathers that covers the torso and the shoulders, and there's also a quite a large necklace with black stones set in what look like antique. Well, it's much like brass as it does like gold, and then there were 3 skulls with these black jewels, black crucifixes on them as well. I'm not entirely sure what the animals are. Those
I think they're rats.
Rats. Well, there you go, and which would be completely appropriate. And there are also some other bones on there as well. And, it's just an incredible piece, and it just fits the space that we're in. You know, it's a remarkable piece, and it just fits into this room effortlessly. You know, we've got corrugated walls. We've got lots of Dave's photographs that are framed in some really grand, and in some cases quite gothic and even science fiction frames. I mean, there's a mirror that we were chatting about earlier, and it was from I don't know if he actually made it or was inspired by.
It's inspired by.
The chap that designed Alien, the actual creature, and it's remarkable how so many different styles are going together and actually making a whole. I mean, even as Windows here, he's got I don't know if he came out of a church or a house that was about 400 years old or so.
They were donated to me by an old girlfriend from a house she was restoring. Yeah, so they all went in. One of my plans is to build a stained glass window out of wet plate collodion images. So I'm going to go on a course for for stained glass window making, and so I can do a series of images, but they'll all be held within a Gothic stained glass window piece. I've got at the top here. I've got 2 of the original prints, cartoons in here for, I think it's Portsmouth Cathedral, and it's the original stained glass window templates that they used to draw them from. So I've got. That's another piece to work on. That's another big piece to work on. But that's the stained glass. I love stained glass. Yeah, as you know, Gothic.
Oh, absolutely. And now this takes us neatly back to where we first came in, where I talked about a Series D camera looking quite small in between two very very large cameras, and both of which are trained upon the mannequin, and it's. I'm just looking at the smaller of the two. And how big's the ground glass on that smaller one?
That's probably about 12 by 14. The ground glass, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and when the lights are they're sitting on it correctly, it's focused upon the figure. And it's blowing the background out, and the background is just really, really interesting with those really ornate pictures, which are all quite dark and gothic again. And if anybody, I'll challenge anybody not to come into this room and look at this mannequin and not be completely blown away by the sight of this, and it just truly shows what large format can actually do, because it's in perfect focus and everything else is behind it. But when people talk about that 3D pop, that 3D look that you get, this has got it in spades. It's absolutely beautiful.
The lens on there is the 1894 Dalmaya 3B. And up on the wall there, I'll show it to you in a minute, there's a photocopy from the original ledger of the day the lens was sold, which was January the 8th, 1894. And the man it was sold to, because the serial number's on there, which is part of what I love about this historical photography. You can trace it all the way back. You can see the day the lens that lens was sold and was written in the book. So it's the 1894 portrait lens, and you can't go wrong with it. It's just a stunning lens until it drops out of the camera one day. But that's another story. So there you go. So that's what it does. Actually, if you come round here, Andrew, you might find I can get my iPhone to look through the back of there, and you can see the image through the back.
Yeah, I was just doing it with the Facebook, because we're on Facebook Live again, so we've got Simon doing a podcast. It's all quite weird, really, and then Facebook Living.
Do you want to see if you can get
your iPhone on the back through there?
The camera right into the back of the Series D.
I often use that to show the models. Shall I do it?
Here we go.
There you go. So if you go in closer, you go. There you go. And then you can click on the focus. Yeah, so what I often do is, when I'm shooting with a model, I'll take a picture with the iPhone through the viewfinder, show it to her, and we build the picture up that way. Yeah. So the studio is, most people call it I call it the Studio of Strange, or the Old Curiosity Shop. I think that probably best describes it.
Yeah.
And then that's my grandmother's cabinet that's lit up, and it's just full of whatever I find, really. I love religious artefacts, dolls, as you could probably tell, and just old photographs and old bits of cameras.
Some of this reminds me of Toy Story, when that guy ripped up dolls and made hideous contraptions. Do you remember?
Yes.
This one in particular.
Isn't she lovely? She was actually a pin cushion. That's what I bought her as. But I just thought, I look at the beauty of this, the craftsmanship, and I think that leads me back to the old cameras as well. There's real craftsmanship in this stuff, in this old stuff. And history. Look at this lovely little face up here. She's just so beautiful.
This is actually very, very difficult to describe what we're actually seeing at the moment.
It's a cabinet full of glass shelves, mirrored shelves, and it's got lots of, for instance, heads off of old dolls, which are particularly interesting because the light, because they have no top to their head, the light comes through their eyes, which gives them a really demonic look. So they're stuck on the top of old light sockets.
I don't think I'll be sleeping in here.
I think I'll be sleeping in here later. This is something that came with. I bought an enlarger once, and this came with it, which is it's a photographic department, and this beautiful interchangeable Super Eva glass Micromatic. I have no idea what it's for, apart from the fact it's all made of glass, and it's just precision of these two coming together.
But just to explain, we're looking at a very large glass syringe.
Yeah.
Actually, it's in millilitres as well. So
and it actually is all made of glass. The actual the precision of the glass movement, one inside the other, is just stunning. Apart from that, we've got jars there with Barbie's legs in and rats' heads.
As you do.
This one here is very interesting. This is a badger's head, okay, and this came about, and we'll see this in a minute when I take you into the darkroom. when I was doing a photo shoot, and it was the very first photo shoot I ever did with the Series D, and I was shooting with a good friend of mine, Gabriella, and we were doing an angel shoot, and she was at the top of a step ladders in the middle of a field wearing the angel's wings. And the nice thing about it is with that shoot, Jeff had produced some Waterhouse Stops for me. So although I was shooting with a 2.8 lens in bright sunlight at f400, I could put the Waterhouse Stops on the front and get...
Just for our listeners, you're talking about Jeff Perry of 20th
Jeff Perry of 20th Century, yeah. So he does all my large format camera work for me. And he produced this camera for me, which has got tilt on it, front tilt, movement all over the place, which is my workhorse camera. But he made these Waterhouse Stops for me, and that enabled me to be able to put them over the top and stop the lens down enough that I could still get enough light. Anyway, I digress. While I was... This is where it all falls out, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not going to touch it because I'll just
break
it. Oh, okay. Oh, right, yeah, of course,
yeah. So that gives me the movement
weird,
I've got. So I can play a lot with this lens and create amazing depths of field. So it's actually started to become my studio camera now as well as my on-location camera. Because it creates weird perspective. I'm doing a portrait with this. I can have the eyes in focus, but I can have the chest and the cheek completely out of focus. So you'd start to really play with...
Yeah, so you're getting all the benefits of those large format movements, but actually it's much easier, isn't it?
And because of the eyepiece on the top...
You've got direct vision of it, and then you can click.
Exactly. But the reason I talk about the head of the badger is we were doing a shoot with this camera for the very first time, and in the corn, right below me, was a complete corpse of a badger that had obviously been killed, and it was all there, and it had obviously been eaten by various animals to the point that it was almost gone. And I brought it back to the house, and for 2 years it was in my garden, bleaching away. And recently, the lady at Dolly's Follies, whose beautiful pieces, I gave her all the bones, and she's made me a beautiful chess piece from the bones of that animal, which I think is lovely because I found that animal, and now it's back in my studio as a piece of art, So, so that was the link to that one anyway. So, and then the rest of it is just various heads and weird bits hanging around. And then what I tend to find is a lot of models, when they come into my studio, like you, tend to look around a lot and be excited by what they see, and then they choose things to pose with. So the shoot we did with Katerina recently, she's holding this piece which is a ram's head with skull down below her, so you can't see anything of her nether region sort of thing. She's got a very long wig on, and I walked out and she was wearing... An old girlfriend of mine came and gave me this mummified head of a monkjack that she found in her
a parting gift to you, was it?
Yeah, it was a parting gift, yeah. It was a little love thing. And I came out and Katerina was wearing this on her head, and we just created this crazy dramatic wet plate collodion shot. So that's what I like, the fact that people come in here and then they just get inspired. And I mean, up here there are boxes and boxes and boxes of clothing. I've got wedding dresses over the back there. I've got Victorian mourning masks. There's fencing. There's a women's fencing outfit up there. There's some Arabic stuff. And it's all a bit weird, but it suits what I do really, which is hopefully not the norm. I've got backdrops I can drop in as well, which we use. But once I've got a log fire going on here in the winter, we've got a nice fire going, and I've got some pumping music going on. I can lose myself for 8 hours in here. I've done shoots with models in here, and we get carried away, and we'll end up shooting for 10 hours. There's one model I shoot with, Sheena, and she wears all incredible latex outfits, and she takes hours to put it all together. And then we shot, it's just crazy amount of time we shoot for. But the beauty of a large format and shooting this way is you never quite know what you're going to get. You kind of plan the shoot, but it takes its own course once you start going on it, and it's so nice to capture with these old lenses as well. So that's it. That's my little workspace. This is probably the worst buy I ever made up the top here. I'll tell you about that. I was bidding on a camera, which was a Soho camera. Excuse me. Scott of the Antarctic, when he went and did his fated trip, he went with him with Herbert Ponting, who's one of my favourite photographers of all time. And Herbert Ponting took thousands of plates. And anyway, there was a Soho camera up for sale, and I was going to put a bid on it. And I basically pulled the tendon off my finger. So as I went in to check where my bid was, my finger brushed across and it said sold. And I thought, what the hell was that? And I ended up buying a set of reindeer bells. and I contacted them and I said, I bought. So she said yes. She said we never thought we'd sell those. And when someone bid on it, a huge cheer went up inside the auction house. And I said, can I put them back into the auction? She said, you can. And I said, no, I'm going to keep them. So they'll be good for a shoot one day. So yeah, so the joys of online auction bidding. So yeah. So yes, this is my workspace. Full of tripods, lighting mounts, my latest lighting system, which I'm just putting in because I need a lot of power. Unlike Shane in America, I didn't build mine with a complete glass side, which I should have done as a wet plate photographer.
Facing north as well.
Yeah, but he's got more light around him than you probably get here.
Probably has, yes. Yeah, exactly. So, so I rely on a lot of light. The whole village will dim later when we use the lights. So, so this is the studio.
Just before we started recording, we were talking about the two cameras and the two large cameras, and Andrew was asking you about the contraption that they're sitting on.
Yeah,
and there's some good advantages over it being a tripod, aren't there?
Definitely.
So if you can describe what it is that we're looking at.
So what this is unbeknown, I bought this. I was bidding on Cook produced a beautiful portrait lens. I got a 12.5-inch portrait lens that was in an old camera. It's an old Kodak number 8 camera, which I've got up the top there, and it all came on this stand, this beautiful stand. And the beauty of this stand is it's got a horizontal back on it, which is probably 24 inches by 18 inches flat. And I didn't appreciate quite how important that is for large cameras, because a lot of my large cameras used to sit on tripods. And the problem with the tripod is I'm always terrified I'm going to strip the thread and the whole lot will tumble to the floor, And the other thing about that is no matter how strong your tripod is, there's usually a little bit of wobble, when you take the shot or you push the release. Whereas this is a complete flat back. I don't really know how old it's Victorian, I think, but I can now take the back from ground level. There's just basically a huge mangle on the side, which is just like an old washing mangle. It's spring-loaded, so it winds itself back up again, and it gives me this beautiful flat base to work from. And I've also got some tilt on the back as well. I've recently made a new base for it, purely so I want to put some big industrial legs in there, and I wanted to raise the camera a few inches, so I've just made this so it's just easier to get around.
So and when you say you made a new base, I mean it's a dolly, isn't it? So it's,
I made a big three-legged dolly, with wheels, big wheels on it. A, so I can raise it, and B, it just gives me a slightly smoother transport as I'm moving the camera around.
I mean, looking at the actual frame itself before the dolly was put on it, did it have wheels on it before, or was it? It came.
I bought it without wheels. I did put wheels on it, but I found them sticking too much, and I didn't want to move. I don't want to jolt the camera too much. So this, for me, felt a better solution. It was flat. It just moves. It glides around the studio a lot more now. The other large camera, the big mahogany camera, has got small wheels on it. It does move pretty well because the camera is so heavy. It tracks across the ground quite well, sort of thing. The big mahogany camera is a work of art. The bellows extension on this camera is just over 6 foot. So I've got a 6 foot bellows extension. So if I want to do macro photography with this camera, I can do it.
Yeah.
It's as you know, you can see it. Can't you? It's just, you can't, obviously on the podcast you can't see it, but it's just a stunning piece of furniture as much as anything else.
You've got to be good at your bellows extension calculations there for your exposure, haven't you? Really, to get that right.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. The beauty of this camera is that even the bellows are in good condition. So so I got lucky with that one. But it's just a lovely piece of work of art. It's just mangle wheels and cogs that go round. And I think why a lot of us like large format photography, because it's just mechanical. You know, it's all, there's no electrical bits on it. It obviously at one point had a Packard shutter attachment, because you can see the small hole at the front.
Yeah.
And so inside it would have had a Packard shutter just inside here, or one of the clamshell ones that opens and shuts.
Is the Packard one? Sorry, is the Packard one that I had one once on an old camera and it never worked, but with a little bit of string that you pull? Is that it? That's it, isn't it?
So this is what?
No. That's like you're thinking of the Thornton Pickard.
Oh, you're thinking of the Thornton Pickard.
Yeah.
No, this is the Packard shutter.
Yeah. Right.
So this is the shutter I bought.
Close.
Close, yeah. It's coming out there. So this I've built a frame for it, and I put a tripod mount on it. So it's a 1920s, I think, Packard shutter, which is vacuum controlled. So as I push the button or squeeze the trigger, the shutter opens. I can either have it in two positions where I open it, leave it open until I let go for a longer exposure, or I can do a timed exposure when I put the pin through. And depending on how I depress the plunger, I can change the speed. Which I've timed as well.
We're waiting for modern equivalents to be made, aren't we? Maybe not quite as big as that, but.
And this sits on a tripod and just sits in front of here like that. And then I'm just ready to take my shot and click, I get my shot. So that's how we go from a barrel lens with a timed exposure.
Yeah.
So on this camera I've been doing film 8 x 10 shots. So my favourite photographer is George Harrell, who did the 1940s Hollywood shots. And if you look at any of his work, he's using the same stand as this. Yeah. Exactly the same stand. He's using a Cooke portrait lens, and he's using a Packard shutter.
Yeah.
So I thought, I've got no excuse. If he could do it, why can't I do it? So,
but they're pretty rare to find, are they?
They're not. They're still being made new by the original company. But the beauty of these is, you take them apart, they're so simple to mend. You can just, and it's just so logical. I mean, I think there's a 40th of a second I'm getting out of that. It just works. It just does its thing. So it means that suddenly, because when I was shooting the lady in laying on my bridge at my pond, nude sort of thing.
I know, yeah.
I was able to use. I was using a bowler hat, but I can't do a bowler hat in a quarter of a second.
Well, you can have a guess, but it's difficult, isn't it?
I did see somebody once who has two dark slides, and they put the dark slides, and they've got this technique where they do that. They open them and shut them, but it all seemed a bit faffy to me.
That was like in like a fan opening and closing.
Yeah, like a fan.
Yeah.
They go to make. But I thought, there's various things. People, I know Shane's got a guillotine one, and where it just drops down, the gravity drops the guillotine, and it just goes past that way.
And as is Borut.
Yeah,
Borut's got a similar kind of setup, hasn't he?
Yeah. So that's it. I mean, most of the wet plate stuff I do with these cameras don't require that, because I want as much light as possible. When I shoot with the Mahogany Beast, if I shoot film with that, I always shoot at f/64, because I want the lens as small as that, because I'm trying to get my exposure down to 4 seconds or 3 seconds, so that I've got time to take the hat off and time it and do it that way. I could now do it with the Packard shutter, but I actually love the detail that it gives me when I shoot at that tiny little f-stop. It's just, the whole world's in focus at that point. It's ridiculous. So that lens there I was given, it's just a Carl Zeiss something or other, I can't remember what it is.
It's a Tessar.
Is it?
50, well, it's a 500mm, effectively, yeah.
The guy that services my Rolleiflex cameras, Brian Mickleborough, he said, I've got a lens for you out in the garage somewhere. And he wandered out with this. It was filthy. And I sort of sat on a park bench, or sat in the garden and cleaned it all out. And it's just a cracking lens. You've seen the back of the camera.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's my 3 cameras, really. That's my workhorse. Apart from my Crown Graphic, this is what I would shoot with most of the time. The Super Reflex will be outdoors from Jeff, and the new bomb camera from Max in Italy. So, and then whatever lens I choose to put in there. So, and then I could take you through to the darkroom. So through here, last time you were in Andrew, there wasn't a door there, so I sold the car that was in there. And now this is my gallery stroke darkroom. So if we go through here.
It wasn't the car from the Adams family or anything like that, was it?
No, it was a beautiful Carmen gear. So this is now my model's changing room. my gallery.
Got a scooter to perch your models on as well.
My 1957, Lambretta, and my darkroom, which is where, so it basically gives me a lot more space now to move around.
That's much better, isn't it?
My cameras are all up the top there. These are all my handmade cameras that I build. That's my pinhole cameras, more pinhole cameras. Stocks of film, getting a bit limited now, my Foma 400. And then over here is my workspace for large format photography, for wet plate photography. So, it's just another curio cabinet of weirdness again, and old photographic techniques and bits and bobs, really. So,
and Andrew, as a darkroom aficionado, would you like to describe what you're looking at in here and what your feelings are? Because it's another incredible space, and unlike any darkroom I've ever been in.
Well, it's more than a darkroom, isn't it? Really, it's just what you'd expect bolted on to what we've just seen. Really, I mean, there is a De Beer 5x4 enlarger with a condenser head on in the corner, which is Dave's main means of making a print.
Yep.
There's a 3D printer next to it, but we'll skip over that for the moment. Next to that is just some areas for doing things with plates, which we don't understand, but maybe we will do later. And then he's got a couple of sinks for washing, because you need sinks for washing. And what else have we got? We've got a cupboard with all sorts of things in, which are your wet plate chemicals and things, are they?
it's all...
Or is it for display purposes only?
It's got my chemicals in it. It's also got lots of historical photography things in it, which I collect. So it's got original Ilford stereo plates that have never been opened, glass lantern plates. I've got some, just various bits of original darkroom paraphernalia that tends to find its way to me. Some developing tanks. Don't know what that is. It's beeping.
Oh.
You got some American woman talking to you there.
Yeah, I had one of those the other day. It's like some kind of alert system to tell you that the world's ending or something like that.
But this space here is more than a darkroom. Last time I was here, there was a car here, but now there's a Lambretta. And in Shane Balkowicz style, we have a wall full of wet plate collodion images, framed amber type, tin type pictures.
Yeah.
Which is stunning.
Yeah.
Many of them framed in old wooden dark slide backs and things like that, I guess.
Yeah, I tend to look for plate holders to keep them.
Plate holders, yeah.
And then old frames.
And there's your bottle of dolls that I was.
That's my jar of doll pieces. Yeah.
And then we have Erik in the corner.
Eric, a few Eriks. Yeah, there's a few Eriks knocking around.
Fine figure of a specimen.
She's marvellous, isn't she? So, it's a place for me to, when I'm doing workshops, we can sit and talk, discuss, drink tea. Models have privacy and come in here and get changed, and somewhere for me to keep all my plates. So this is my amber type box over the back here. This is where I keep. Let's get that moved forward a bit. This is where I keep all my plates before they get varnished. So these are my 10-8 in tin types. But these are, more importantly, these are my amber types, which tend to go in here while I'm waiting to do contact prints off them or something.
I was going to say, just for the benefit of listeners that haven't heard many of our previous shows, what's the difference between a tin type and an amber type?
Okay, so a tin type is produced, it's wet plate collodion, and you put the collodion onto a sheet of black tin, anodised tin, and you end up with a direct positive plate immediately. Whereas an amber type is the same solution, but it goes onto a sheet of glass, and it creates a negative print. It's negative, obviously, when it's on a light background, and when it goes onto a black background, it turns into a positive.
So you can have an amber type and then put the blackness on the back to view it as a positive.
That's what they would originally do.
Yeah.
You would just coat the back of it, and it would become positive. But I've got this cabinet where I keep all my amber types ready for contact printing. So I can do contact prints off of them, and I don't like to varnish my amber types, so that's why I keep them safe in there. And then I have a large collection of tintypes that need varnishing, and amber types as well from various shoots that have been going on recently. Yeah, so that's it. There's a huge box here full of 5x4 film holders, various ages, and yeah, that's it. My Devere 54. What more could you want? That's all I need really. It's my space. So yeah, lots of drying racks, lots of modifying backs, because I work at different size plates. I create different size weirds things, so I create my own backs to go in the camera. That gives me all different sizes. Addition, I've now got hot water in my dark room, which is a huge help. Running
Just having water is a delight. Yeah. I've never had it, but then I think for alternative processing, you got to have it.
With wet plate, it's really helpful.
Yeah.
Over the back there, I've got my where is it? It's my Canadian ice fishing tent, which is my portable darkroom tent for wet plate collodion, which is when I'm out in the field. I can take and do stuff out there. Yeah, so it's all in here. And then there's just a series of prints, lenses. That's the biggest lens I've ever had, is that massive thing over the back there, which I want to make a van camera out of one day, or a lorry camera. That's another little project I'm working on at the moment. How I can use it, but it turned out to be that lens had fungus in it. That was out of a World War II bomber, that thing. It just weighs, and it's just insane, the weight of this lens. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the big hectare, isn't it?
That's the big hectare, yeah.
Hectare.
Yeah, it's just ginormous thing. I had no idea why I bought it. It seemed a good idea at the time. I will do something one day with it over the years.
It's a shame it's got that balsam separation on there, where you got those
you got fungus in there.
Yeah, but where you got those, it almost looks like an impact on ice or something like that, and that's where to the.
It was a gamble when I didn't. To be honest, the whole shebang cost me £40, I think. So it's worth a gamble on that price. To be honest, it would probably not be that bad if I actually had it in a van.
I don't think it'd be an issue in the slightest. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, on the smaller formats, we can get obsessive about fungus and balsam separation and haze and things like that. But when you're talking large format, it just doesn't matter as much, because you're using your image is that much larger. Those little things matter less.
Especially with wet plate. If I'm going to shoot something like a 24-inch square glass plate, it doesn't really matter. And also, it's the anomalies and the weird light effects that I love.
Yeah.
So, to be honest, I'd probably hit it anyway with that. No, I wouldn't hit it with a hammer. But, and then here is my fridge full of chemicals, which are my Keep It Dark and Cool. That's the top line. Various bottles of varnish along this side. Plate darkener. Collodion that we'll be using today. Plate developer we'll be using. Varnish we won't be using. 8x10 X-ray film, 8x10 foamer, and then these are lovely. I've been shooting with some of these. These are expired 1940s films, which I managed to get hold of, which are quite fun to practice with. So there's enough here to keep me going for the next 20 years, I'd say, really, in here. I don't need to come out, let's be honest. And then in here this is coloured portrait waiting to be developed. And I've got a whole series of expired colour negatives up here, which I've not yet got round to actually experimenting with yet. I've even got some weird things that came with the camera, and I don't know what it is. It's got a chemical in it, but I don't know what it is. So that's half the joy of it all, isn't it? Really, and it's just. I love just being surrounded by this stuff. It's just so lovely. I mean, I love the fact that when I'm doing wet plate collodion and I'm doing amber types, part of the process involves me separating egg whites and mixing it with water. And I think there's not many chances you get to use egg whites in photography. So, not these days anyway.
Meringues, maybe.
Meringues. And these are my deep tanks for my big... So in the bottom there are the big Kodak deep tanks. But there's too much chemicals needed for one of those, so I don't bother with those. So I'm using the other thing. So yeah, that's my studio. This is my darkroom stroke gallery, really. There you go. Welcome.
Right, now then, you've just listened to part one of the LFPP on tour at Dave Shrimpton's studio. And now we're back in our usual place, and we're back with somebody that has been very quiet for the last 90 minutes because Erik is back with us. So welcome, Erik.
Because I'm not here. No. Hey, gentlemen. I use that term loosely, but with affection. How are things over on the other side of the pond?
I think they're absolutely fantastic. Especially, I'm still on the buzz from being with Dave. That was an absolutely incredible day we had.
I would say you're on a buzz for actually like being with people. How weird. I mean, I don't know what it's like over there, but over here it's really, really, it just feels surreal to actually walk out of your place. Not just walk out of your place, but like go somewhere where there's other people. And they're not even necessarily socially distanced. It feels both bizarre and dangerous and surreal. Like it's
funny you should mention that because about a week and a half ago, I went on a photo walk that was organised by Paul from Analog Wonderland, and the walk was in Oxford, and loads of people turned up. In fact, there was a limit on how many people could turn up for it, legally speaking, and I think we bounced off that limit, and it was a really odd thing. And what was also interesting about it is there were a couple of guys from the Sun 16 podcast. There was Aid and Graham, and they made a whole show on just about how odd it was to actually be with people. And you're absolutely right. It is odd, but it's brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic to actually be able to speak to people again.
Yeah, I mean, there's a photo walk coming up for EBCO in July, and it'll be the first like in person, because we've been doing like virtual photo walks where it's like choose a subject, everybody go shoot like the day before, 2 days before, and then have a virtual meetup of the work afterwards, and that's all fine and good and whatever, but it's not the same. So it'll be, because EBCO photo, I don't know about you guys, but like our photo walks inevitably end up at a bar or a brewery or something, with like gear strewn all over a table intermixed with like pints of beer and whatever. Photographers and alcohol, I guess. Two subjects which will be forever inextricably linked. And you can't really do that well virtually. I mean, you can, but it's just not the same at all. No. So sort of like walking into somebody's like studio and like you guys just did, and like getting a tour and taking photographs and going to their dark room and whatnot, like actually like interviewing people in person without masks on. Or were you masked up? Were you guys masked up? You were far too clear to be masked up.
No, we weren't, but we maintained, for the most part, good social distancing, and we were all double vaccinated as well. Not that actually should give you, it doesn't give you immunity, it just reduces your chances of getting the Rona.
Totally, the Rona. Well, but I mean, I have to ask, like, is his studio, I mean, there's descriptions of it and like the occasional photos on his Instagram, but is it as just completely off the hook? Like I watched, I mean, I'm a fan, right, of you two, but also of him. And like his studio just seems like a playground of just props and, he's got, obviously, well, he has me. He has a bald, naked, no hair me, with a very manly chest. Andrew. Which Andrew apparently can't keep his hands off of. But like there's...
Not just the chest either.
Okay. I feel violated. We're stopping there. But with like just props galore. Like how big is that space?
Well, I would say that as soon as you asked that question, you've not actually been listening to the last hour and a half of this podcast, have you?
Well, not in its entirety, no.
No, we did. We did send the podcast to you, and then just in the just in the chat we just had, you were saying like, yeah, well, I've heard the 6 minutes of it. And goes, no, there's 90 minutes. Oh, was there?
Well, so I knew it was that. But this, and ladies and gentlemen, now we come to the much missed hazing of Erik. Is totally fine. I'm still the intern.
Well,
so it's okay. Haze the intern. It's totally fine.
Well, I've got to say that although you've just listened to 90 minutes of Andrew and I, in this section, Andrew is he is here, and you've just heard him mumbling a couple of times. But say hello, Andrew.
Hello, Andrew.
It's good to have
He's
you.
He's suddenly a shy retiring violet. Like, how does that work?
Yeah.
Well, you were making up for lost time and lost airspace, Eric. Far be it from me to interject. I would say that listen to your conversation about social distancing and the Oxford photo walk. When that was announced, it was announced, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, a couple of months ago. I knew about it and I could have jumped straight on it, and I thought, so I'm a bit wary about 30 people, meeting up. So I said, it might be a little bit soon for me. But actually now I'd jump at it. Maybe that's partly because, I've had 2 jabs and I know, Simon, it doesn't make us immune, but it certainly reduces the risk somewhat. And most of the folks that we would be meeting up with, well, I don't know, I'm making an assumption now that they're all of an age where they might have had 2 jabs, but there were certainly some young guys there. But I mean, I went out last week. I was in Liverpool and went out with 9 people. And we went and had beer and went and had a meal. Okay, we had a table of 5 and 4 because, strictly speaking, you weren't supposed to have 9 of you. And none of us were wearing masks, but everyone had been double jabbed. And I think I'm getting to a point where, do you know what? I can't be a hermit anymore, I still put my mask on. I'm still putting my mask on when I go into shops. I'm, not getting over familiar with strangers. You'll be pleased to know. And but I'd certainly go now if it was being organised for this weekend. I'd go. I wouldn't have a problem now. But almost a year of living in fear, to be quite truthful,
Yeah, fear or just exceptional levels of caution.
Yeah, probably.
As the case may be, and like. Yeah, when you see people inside stores without masks, it's still like just uncomfortable. Like, what are you doing? Like, I don't know.
I'm exempt. I've got a card that says I'm exempt. Look, not me. That's what they do.
Well, just
get off my lawn.
Well, I just realised that we've not really this chat hasn't really had much context for our dear listener.
As usual.
Yes, exactly. And it's a case of we've our day with Dave was quite a long day, and it was very interesting. And so what we've done is split the audio into 2 parts. So you've heard the first part, and we're going to do the second part in the next time the podcast goes out. And what this is more of a reflection upon our day. Chat about it, but that's now going to be a little bit limited because only 2 people know what went on for reasons we discussed earlier. But we're going to cover some of the things that we actually happened there, and I think the first thing that I really want to talk about regarding our day, and probably the most important thing that actually happened there, and it was our discussion about coffee right at the start, and. In particular, there were aspersions about the quality of Stoke-on-Trent water given by Andrew. And I think he might be right, because I can't make good coffee with the Cocoa Bolo coffee that's been sent to me unless I go to Cheshire and have water from Cheshire, which is not really that practical for me. But what I did actually find out, what I decided to do when I got back and had another coffee, was that I used Lidl coffee that comes in a tin. It's actually half decent, but it's a little bit, the flavours in it, it's well, probably because of the Stoke water, actually. It just like hits you in the face and coffee, and that's it. And so what I did, I've modified my coffee now, and I use I largely fill the coffee basket up with the usual Lidl coffee, but then I've been putting a couple of teaspoons of the Cocoa Bolo coffee in, and it's made such a difference. Blending those 2 together, and
you've been cutting your shit, have you? Is that what you've been doing?
Exactly, yeah. That's yeah. You know far too much about that, Andrew, than I would have realised. But yeah. So if you are in a situation like me and you've got problems with your coffee, then you can always try and blend it yourself. And I can say that adding a bit of cocoa bola coffee is excellent added to Lidl coffee.
So the quality of water in London is it's always been said that you have a drink of water out of the tap. It's probably been through, I don't know, I'm making up the number now, 12 people's bodies before it reaches you in that pint. I don't know how many bodies it would have passed through in Stoke-on-Trent. Don't know if you have that statistic to hand, but I'm thinking maybe that maybe the quality of wee in London is perhaps is of a higher standard. Maybe the diet's better, or
it's just more
standard of living.
intense.
Yeah,
It's just more of an intense.
yeah. So, who knows?
There's a lot of people who are taking the piss in London.
Quite literally.
Stoke water is rock hard, so I think that's where the problem is. So we just need tougher coffee, or we need to soften it a little bit with a bit of cocoa bola coffee.
Mm-hmm. And did you make it in your espresso maker?
Eric, do you want to comment on that?
I am far be it for me of all people to get in a tomato, sort of argument. Bullocks and all that, but it is espresso. It is not the coffee formerly known as espresso.
I even had to come home and Google it because I was so convinced that I knew.
Well, you did find that movie reference.
Yeah.
Espresso Bongo, which should be a coffee brand.
But espresso sounds a lot. Espresso is a bit cumbersome on the tongue, I find. So espresso is. I shall carry on calling it an espresso. I'll say I'll have an espresso. I've been calling it that in polite company for years, and nobody, apart from Simon. See, I've been calling it in polite society for years until Simon publicly called me out on air.
This is what friends are for. We help to point out people's failings.
Like me not listening to the podcast, and Andrew's putting an X into espresso, or Andrew's just being edgy. X espresso. There's nothing wrong with being edgy.
Look at the way the Americans have butchered the English language since you took it from these shores, 200 years ago, whatever. William Shakespeare, look at how he made words up and changed words and spelt words. Words were spelt differently for generations until they were, gradually standardized, weren't they?
We're literally just like making more streamlined. Color, C-O-L-O-U-R. Why? What's up with the U? Like, I don't. Color, C-O-L-O-R. It works fine.
Mm-hmm. So how do you explain missile there's an I? Well, there's two I's in there.
As opposed to missile.
Exactly, yeah. What's that all
about? Missile.
It's like mistletoe.
Yeah.
But you're going to send a missile over to Iraq.
Exactly. Yeah. Sadly, we did do a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put some oregano in my pasta dish.
Oregano.
Or, is that an herb or a herb?
It's an herb.
It's not! It really is an herb. I don't get H in it.
What, do you Americans not say the H in that word?
No, they just say it's an herb.
Say herb.
We made up the thing called a silent. It's a silent H.
It's not a silent H. What's wrong with you?
Oh, my word.
See, my espresso lapse pales into insignificance compared with you lot in America. Goodness me.
Yeah. Anyway, so
but there's a difference between just a style standard and just you like YOLOing off and saying, "Screw all of you! I'm putting an X in this."
Yeah, you could be right.
So,
well, I'm sure the listeners are getting a lot out of this so far.
I'm sure they are.
Fuck is up with these three?
Yeah. So
back to the circus.
Yes. So
Erik is here and is back to a circus.
But you asked the question earlier about Dave's studio. And
it's like a playground.
It's truly incredible. I mean, when we were chatting there, Andrew was started off doing I don't know if he did it twice, but he was live streaming to our Facebook group, and it's not difficult to see why, because you walk in there and you're almost overwhelmed with things.
Okay, so now I get to interview you two about like your experience there. For each of you, what was your single favorite, like mind-blowing prop that he has to photograph? Like he's got all this cool shit. What was the one thing you were like, what is that?
I'm tempted to say
like,
the reindeer bells were interesting, but that was because he bought them by accident on when his finger slipped on an auction.
The mannequin, that dressmaking mannequin thing with the was it a neck piece or was it a shoulder piece? I can't remember that thing.
Yeah,
with the feathers,
it was inspired by something, wasn't it? Made by that lady who makes things.
That's right. That's really well explained. And fortunately, Dave explained that earlier in the podcast, so we won't have to.
Thanks, Dave.
We were clearly paying a lot of attention there. But
there'll be a quiz later, listeners, so you can explain it better than we do.
Yeah, but it was David already got this thing out, and it was like it was already lit as soon as you walked in the room. So and his two giant cameras were trained upon it, and just that as an experience to look through, two really large screens on the ground glass. And see this thing that just looked macabre. It was just incredible, and just seeing how. I mean, you obviously we used to seeing things in focus and then things dropping out of focus quickly, especially with relatively fast lenses. But again, it was otherworldly when you're actually looking at this and you could walk around the screen because it was nice and the ground glass screen. It was quite dim where the cameras were. Mm-hmm. And it just looked real inside. It must have been like the first time that people went to the cinema and saw a train coming towards them, and they ran out. They got out of the seats because they thought they were going to get run over by a train. It was a similar kind of experience for me. I was thinking, I've seen this kind of thing before loads of times, but somehow this was just completely different again. It was just taking things to a whole new level.
And Andrew.
I was taken by lots of things. It wasn't really a prop that I could see myself using, but I was struck by the dolls' heads that were hanging from the ceiling upside down by a noose. I was struck by those, and but I think Dave's stuffed armchair that I ended up, spoiler alert, photographing him on in part 2 of this podcast, which we'll talk about some other time. He's got this stuffed armchair. And I think why it's poignant for Dave is, first of all, it's a great stuffed armchair, and all the stuffing's coming out of it, leather thing it is. But he's got a photograph of his late mother that he managed, and I don't think his mother really wanted her photograph made at all. And she's in this armchair, and I think that's a great prop to have in his studio. But it's a centerpiece. But everything in there, Erik, is just mind-blowing. As you haven't listened to the podcast, I'm presuming you haven't watched the live Facebook streams.
That's the only reason I knew you guys were doing it, is because I saw Andrew Bartram is streaming, and they're like, we're making a podcast. I was like, oh, thanks for letting me know.
For rubbing
thanks for letting me know, to be able to even just like come in on the phone and watch vicariously as you do it. No, thanks a lot. I actually think I messaged you. I was like, wait, we're doing a podcast? Like, oh, they're doing a podcast.
Not you.
Right. But regardless of that, it makes sense because I'm not there. I mean, I was down the street 3 miles, apparently, unbeknownst to me.
Well, your stand-in did a great job.
Did a bang-up job. But it beggars the question, like, so is he? Because I won't say he's an, I want to be like ageist or whatnot, but but he's a slightly older gentleman. But
we're not really sure how old he is. He's probably
he's
eternal.
Timeless.
He's eternal.
Yeah, he's timeless. But his work has a massive amount of variety. Like, he seems to be constantly sort of playing with different things, different styles. I did notice there is one, like, I don't know if you guys mentioned it out there. There's one outdoor spot where like the branches are overlapping over a path or whatever.
The lane.
That's the lane. His favorite like portrait location because the branches just lend themselves to a swarthy bokeh, in and of
It's
themselves.
at the back of his house, and I was most disappointed because we were going to photograph Simon naked with a wig on and a skull across his nether regions with a pair of angel's wings on.
You didn't tell me about that.
I would be both
Sitting in a pram.
terrified and intrigued by this. I don't know. Well, that's a showstopper. Hold on. Let me get past that visualization. Thank you, Andrew, for that.
Yeah, that's just outside his house, so that little lane. But the weather was rubbish while we were there.
Okay.
So we did everything inside.
But he's a latecomer to photography per se, right? Like within the last 5 or 6 years.
I'm going to say that, but and he's told me probably more than once, but I can't actually remember. He may have even said it in the podcast, but I can't remember that either. But yeah, relatively, isn't he, Simon? Relatively new to all this.
But your point about is we were chatting earlier about it. He's very experimental, and you look around is whether it be his house or in the studio. There's lots of his work around, and there's it's different in style in genre, and experimental is definitely a word for some of his work as well. I mean, there was one photograph I don't think we talked about it on the podcast. I'm not sure, but there were like two photographs overlapping. I think there was I don't know if there was a Tint type base and then there was an Ambry type in the front of it. And depending on the way that the light would fall upon it, you would see one or two or the photograph will come together, which was pretty impressive.
Yeah, actually, we can see it on his Instagram. He's holding them by hand, and sort of playing around with it. It's called Both Worlds, yeah, it is really, 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 really cool.
I was also when we had a tour around the back end of his house because we were recording in his kitchen. And then I think Simon stopped the recording and we had a wander through into his sort of you'd imagine a Victorian conservatory, and more things in there. And that's where he showed us his stereo. He's got now a love of stereoscopic photography. So he's got this beautiful little French stereographic camera, and he's got boxes of stereo plates that he's bought, and he's got one of those viewers, wooden viewers.
Jason Lane just recently got one of those dry plate stereo cameras, French ones. They're really cool.
Yeah,
he's
used it and got some great results. But he goes down these little rabbit holes, but he pursues them and pushes them and makes these wonderful developments. I mean, he loves Instax and, Polaroid type things. And, he'd go away and he came back with his RB with his Instax back on it,
Which with the Instax RB back, which we talked about previously. Mm-hmm. Actually, did you and Ethan over at Cameradactyl / the Homemade Camera Podcast is going to be releasing a 4x5 and 8x10 film back that essentially is a built-in film development tray as well, so you can sort of do quasi paper negative or paper positive depending on how you want to do it. Instant shots as well, which is I think people are revisiting that whole,
Well, that's like if you don't want to build an Afghan camera, box camera, you could do that. Some people, I've seen them on Instagram or Twitter recently. A guy had set up, I forget who it was, a guy had set up his large format camera in the street in his lunchtime. I think NASA in Simply Oxford as well used to do similar things. And as people walked past, he said, "Can I, take your picture on this old camera?" Well, imagine doing that, but then to be able to, with a RB or something, or a 4x5 camera, then squirting some chemicals in with a little syringe or something, and then having a print says, "There you go, take this home, shake it like a Polaroid."
Yeah, or like, sorry, this is wet, but you can take it home with you, and it'll dry eventually.
Yeah, hold it by the edges and blow on it.
Yeah, I actually saw some guy who he took an Intrepid 4x5 and just sort of built a box around the ass end and turned it into an Afghan camera.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, okay. That's a way to do it.
There's a lady, sorry, Simon, there's a lady in Leicester, I think, who's Jimmy Hickford. I don't know. I feel we've talked about this recently, but maybe it was when we were at Dave's house. I think she's called Afghan Camera Lady or something. Jimmy Hickford bumped into her, and she's out in the streets doing Afghan type work. Maybe we should chat with her at some point.
Well, and there's a dude in France who's making beautiful brand new Afghan cameras. His workshop is awesome, and they're really gorgeous. Like, they're completely bespoke, high end, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Afghan cameras. They're just like, individually made, hand numbered, the whole shoot and match. Every single one is unique and distinct. And they're very nice. Has Dave meandered into Afghan cameras too, since he has literally everything else?
No, I'm surprised he hasn't, really.
I was going to say, that's the next thing.
Yeah, there's definitely time for it. Actually, just
Dave, if you're listening, Afghan cameras.
we were sort of heading away from what we were talking about here, but you just mentioned about this camera that this back that Ethan's developing there, which is now intriguing me. And that was the point. You were on the Homemade Camera podcast only this week as well, which is where you got
I was third stringing it because you rejected them and Nick couldn't show up.
I couldn't do it, but there you go, and I'm glad that you did. But this is really interesting. So the actual, so you take the photograph. Because you're now an expert on it because you've been on the podcast. So you can use this film holder in a regular 4x5 camera. Is that correct?
Yep. Okay. Exactly.
And so you take your photograph as normal, and then am I correct in assuming that when you put the dark slide back in, that in itself forms a fluid tight seal?
Correct.
There. And then you've got a method of pouring your chemicals in and a method of expelling them.
Yeah, it's just got a little, I wouldn't say spout, but it's just got a little like chemical tray right there that goes through a light baffle sort of proof channel that brings the fluid in there. And I think for the 4x5, you said it didn't take much fluid to do it, like 35 milliliter. Like very, very little liquid is required to cover the space. So it's also really... really efficient, basically, because it just needs to cover the surface because your film or paper or whatever is held down flat by magnets. So you don't have to like fill the whole chamber with fluid. You just need to have a layer that's big enough to go back and forth with.
Interesting. When you read, because I've been getting into rotary development of film, I've been reading around the minimum quantities of active ingredient, and for a single sheet of 4x5 film, opinions vary. I think if you read the Darkroom Cookbook, he talks about maybe 50 mils. Other people say 80 mils per sheet, so somewhere around there. So that's quite a low figure. So,
well, and I think
it works, I guess.
I think it was mostly based off of shooting like RC paper or Ilford paper. And paper is a different beast. Yeah. And his goal is obviously to simplify and sort of universally make shooting RC paper and then reverse processing it into positive with, vitamin C. And I think he's using
hydrogen peroxide.
Right? Like that method as being just like a universally approachable, relatively low toxicity sort of approach versus, the standard methods for that use some really nasty, acids that you don't want to touch and you definitely don't want to like put into the grass. Right. So that's kind of what he's after. It's a fascinating beast. I think it's super cool. I'm glad he's doing it. I'll probably buy one. Don't know how I'll use it in the field because again, you have to figure out where that print is going to dry in a dust-free, not going to stick to everything sort of way. But he's hell bent on doing that up to 20 by 24. To replace the old 20 by 24 Polaroid, which is now long gone, right? That's the windmill he's actually tilting at. Like, I don't think he went into this to do a commercial entity at all. He's windmill tilting at the lost 20 by 24 Polaroid.
Yeah, I mean, that could be incredible with direct positive paper, if you can get that
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Or just really affordable, really affordable, inexpensive RC paper per shot is so much cheaper at that size.
If he can nail the process, so you make your exposure onto the paper, and then you know exactly how much citric acid and how much hydrogen peroxide to use, and you don't have to obviously take the back off to look at it, but do it all sort of in camera.
Mm-hmm. Well, not saying in camera, take it and put it down, but yeah.
You take the back off, and you take the back off to do.
Yeah, because that way the tray is flat.
Flat, yeah, right? That makes sense. Yeah. Nearly in camera, isn't it? But not quite.
Yeah. In space. Camera. But yeah, it is pretty fascinating. Although we totally meandered, as we often do, away from the original topic, which is Dave Shrimpton's ways. But you got to play in his darkroom. Speaking of darkroom stuff, is his darkroom is like prodigiously crazy as his fucking studio? Like, is it also like a cavernous space of like every type of alternative process known to man or God?
It's just very, very good. And I think actually, seeing that there is 90 minutes of podcast and then there's us on the end of it, and funnily enough, the darkroom part of it is pretty much where the next episode starts.
So I'm asking for spoilers.
Yes, and so therefore we're not going to do that, other than to say that the second part of the podcast is continuing the practical theme that how the last one finished. And in particular, Andrew has a go at wet plate. And I've got to say, wet plate is awesome.
It is sexy.
I always thought that I'd like it, but my word, I'm still thinking about it now. It's brilliant, and I
have you?
Don't talk too much about that.
Simon, have you seen like a really good wet plate photographer do their business like right in front of you and like been in the tent and watch them?
Yeah, me.
You say that and then you laugh, so I'm not sure if you're having a go or what.
Well, doesn't get any better than what I produced, I don't think. And what all the fuss is about, to be honest.
It was wet plate perfection. We've got to say. So well done, Andrew. He's done that, so he can move.
I now have wet plate dreams.
Yeah.
That.
Yes. And on that note, we shall bring this end bit of the podcast.
I was going to ask questions about the discussion at the end of it about lens fidelity. But we can do that later.
Exactly, and I think that there's a reasonable. Well, certainly the next time next one that goes out, I think there'll be a little bit more time at the end of it. And if there isn't, then we just may have to have three of us having a chat.
I definitely have opinions on lens fidelity and some of the lenses that I see wet plate and dry plate photographers using.
Well, having not only have you been on Homemade Camera Podcast, you've also been on another podcast, haven't you, about lens punk?
Yeah. Oh. I blame Graham. I had nothing to do with that. Yeah. Just Graham over at the Homemade Camera Podcast has a bee in his bonnet about freeing lens elements and making lenses out of them. And I say that also again with affection because he's way into it, and I'm really happy that he's found something photographic that really, like, as I'd say in the United States, that trips his trigger, which is a really terrible turn of phrase now that I think about it. Let's not use that one. But yeah, he's all about building lenses now with like scavenged lens elements and all sorts of stuff. It's really fun to see somebody with that much enthusiasm.
He's doing some good stuff with them as well. I mean,
he is.
Follow me on Instagram. I really like the kind of things he's doing. He's sort of making me think I should be having a go at this. I mean, I almost had to go at it when, in the first throes of enthusiasm, when you came on board with us, and somehow I was too busy to do it, and now it seems to be happening again to me where I want to do this again. So we may have to.
We need to hear about your first experience with the Chroma camera, because somebody commented on either the photograph, I think it was just a photograph that we shared on Facebook on the day, and how puzzled you were looking, staring at it. and then the incredulity around in the community that you actually were using a camera. So.
Yes. I was thinking, there was trying to close this podcast off, and you've just opened up a can of worms there.
Well, I'm not suggesting we talk about it now, but we need to
okay
just
then. Okay.
next time.
Okay.
Yes.
You're looking for things to talk about.
But yes, Graham has given me some level of credit for his enthusiasm for this, and pulled me into this occasional random every couple of months discussion on low fidelity lens building, low to high fidelity lens building with myself and a really great gentleman from Japan named Dominic, who used to actually make cameras. He's a woodworker.
I know.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Dominic Silver.
He lives Tom Silverthorn.
Dominic Silverthorn.
He lives at the foot of Mount Fuji.
Yeah, really, really nice guy.
Yeah.
And he's the one whose moniker is Lens Punk. He's going with a punk rock ethos with his lens building. So, yeah.
That's all good. So we'll be back next time with part 2 of our trip to see Dave Shrimpton. And in the meantime...
I swear to God, I'll listen to both of them.
yeah, definitely, yes. And so that's pretty much it for us. You already heard Dave talking about the places where you can see his work. And I'll quickly go over them again, or at least 2 of them. At least Dave's on Instagram as Dave_Shrimpton, Dave_Shrimpton, and he also has a website which is daveshrimpton.co.uk. Urge you to have a look at both of those because he's ace. It's as simple as that. Actually, a friend of mine, as we speak, as we're recording, is actually doing a workshop with Dave at this moment. He's doing a 2-day workshop, and he's there right now, although I guess he's probably finished his day now. But I chatted to him via Facebook last night, and he was absolutely blown away by it.
Dude, that would be so much fun.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping he's going to come back and be so blown away by it, he's actually going to do some wet plate himself and bring it back to the 6 times dark room, and then we can all have a play with it. Because I want to do it again.
Well, you haven't done it first time yet.
Well, I haven't said that, but
you witnessed a master. You witnessed a master at work.
Yeah,
you did.
And me.
Yes.
I thought, the master and the apprentice.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and I was just the assistant watching on. Andrew, let's do our closing out bits. How can people keep up with you and things like that on the internet and stuff?
I'm mostly Warboys Snapper on Twittery worlds and Facebook, probably. I don't know, but you can find me in the Large Format Photography podcast Facebook group, Making People Experts, which seem to ruffle a few feathers, but we won't go there. I'm going to make Erik one now. So he's an expert. What is he an expert? He's an expert on something called self-developing cameras.
I'm an expert on absolutely nothing.
Yeah, so you can find me there. Lensless podcast is back up and running, so we're every 2 weeks. You can catch me on the Lensless podcast.
Every 2 weeks? Are you promising 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Are you committing?
Well, not this week. We should have been up. I think we should have been up this week or next week, but that's right, 4th of July. There's some weird holiday that you Americans have, so we can't record. We're stuck for Sundays, really, so it's going to be the 20th, I think, when we're back. Got some great guests.
Want me to fill in there on 4th of July for whoever it was, the guy who can't? I mean, I'm happy to. I'm a podcast tart, so you can tart me in. That's the thought.
I know Corey, my co-host, did say, do you want to just do it? I said, that's all right. Wait for you to come back. So we're back every 2 weeks, so there we go. Erik, where can we, if someone wants to send a letter to the show, an email to the show, where would they send an email to?
Now I'm stuck because I always want to append a "the" to the front, and I don't think there's a "the" in the front. So large format photography podcast @gmail.com.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And we do actually have a few emails that we need to go over. So at some point we'll catch up with those. And also we'll catch up with coffee donations as well, because we've had a few since we haven't been on for ages.
So I think including some that aren't actually coffee.
Yes.
Although the actual coffee is pretty awesome, I have to say.
It is. That's done really well for us, definitely. So Erik, how can people keep up with you on internet-wise?
Internet-wise, I say so. Lately, it's just been mostly my day job, but that's Erik H. Matthew at Gmail, not Gmail. Ooh, that is my email address if you really want to harass me, but it's Erik H. Matthew on Instagram.
What's your phone number, Erik?
No, bad Andrew. I mean, I'll give it to you, Andrew. You can call me anytime, but
okay.
But that's pretty much it. I'm starting to do some work in some project that isn't large format, but I'll start posting there somewhat shortly on things that aren't bunny related. Crazy.
Okay, and I'm on Twitter as Simon4. I'm on Instagram as Simon Forster Photographic, which is also the name of my website. And I've actually started to make lens boards for people, custom boards.
Beautiful. That bespoke deep-seated one. God, must have been a long print to like do a board thick enough for that freaking lens, but it's very nice.
I think it was about 4.5 hours.
That's less than I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that was actually the fourth one I had actually done because the others failed for various reasons.
Are you talking about my one or the one you made for
yours, Andrew?
Yeah.
The one for the bomb camera. That's
because it's a solid chunk of plastic, isn't it? That cone bit. I think that's solid, isn't it?
It's not solid, no.
Isn't it? Feels solid.
It's pretty chunky all the same, though. There's a shape in there that fills the gaps a little bit, but it's there to give it rigidity. But if you actually make these things completely solid, it's better to actually make them with a bit of air in, because they got the rigidity is better and they stay in the shape better as well.
Well, I'm very pleased with the end result, and that's going to be my wet collodion tin typey lens when I start doing it. But we'll talk about that next show.
Yes. So that's just about it. We are going to do shout outs, but it'll take us too long, so we'll do shout outs next time maybe. To Dave Shrimpton. We'll shout out to Dave Shrimpton because he's 8.
Hell yeah.
So that's it. Our music is by Kevin MacLeod. It's called Two Finger Johnny, which you didn't hear at the start, but you're going to be hearing now as we speak. So that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's show, and we'll be back soon. So goodbye.
Bye.
See ya.